Commander Alina Blackwood stood at the observation deck of Neptune Defense Station Aegis, her steel-gray eyes fixed on the swirling storms of the ice giant below. 20 years of service in the Human Space Federation hadn't prepared her for what the long-range sensors had detected 6 hours ago. A ghost from humanity's past had emerged from the void, sending shockwaves through the entire defense network. The HSS Harbinger, one of the most advanced warships ever built by humanity, had disappeared without a trace during the height of the frontier wars in 2184. Now, 120 years later, it had suddenly appeared at the edge of Neptune's orbit, its massive silhouette barely visible against the backdrop of space. "Commander," Lieutenant Marcus Joe's voice crackled through her comm unit. "The preliminary scans are complete. You're going to want to see this." In the station's command center, Marcus and Chief Science Officer Dr. Victor Petrov huddled over their holographic displays. The room hummed with tension as other crew members worked their stations in unnerved silence. "Show me," Alina ordered, stepping up to the main display. The image that materialized showed the Harbinger in haunting detail. The once-proud warship's hull was now covered in geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with an inner light. Organic-looking protrusions had grown from its surface, creating a hybrid of human engineering and something entirely alien. "These modifications," Victor said, his weathered face creased with concern. "They're unlike anything in our database. The energy signatures don't match any known technology, human or alien." Alina studied the readings. The Harbinger had been the pride of the Human Space Federation fleet, a kilometer-long titan of titanium and advanced composites. Now it was something else entirely. Life signs. "Inconclusive," Marcus replied, adjusting his display. "We're detecting energy patterns that could be biological in nature, but they're scrambled as if," he hesitated, "as if they're both there and not there at the same time." "Quantum signatures?" Alina asked, her mind racing through the possibilities. "Similar but more complex, Dr. Petrov thinks." A sudden alarm cut through the air. Red warning lights flashed across every screen in the command center. "The Harbinger's powering up," Lieutenant Jade Wang shouted from her tactical station. "Energy surge detected in what appears to be their main drive system." Alina's training kicked in instantly. "Alert status 1, shields to maximum, contact fleet command and—" The words died in her throat as a beam of impossible light erupted from one of the Harbinger's alien protrusions, creating a web of energy that enveloped the entire ship. When it faded seconds later, the vessel had moved closer to the station, now clearly visible to the naked eye through the command center's reinforced windows. "By all the stars," Victor whispered, his instruments going haywire. "That was some form of localized space-time manipulation. They just crossed 40 million kilometers in seconds." Alina keyed her command codes into the station's defense grid. "All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." But the Harbinger made no aggressive moves. Instead, it hung in space like a predator studying its prey, its modified hull catching the dim sunlight in ways that made it seem alive. A new alert sounded, this one different from the others. Marcus's hands flew over his console. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission. It's using old Human Space Federation protocols, but there's something else embedded in the signal." "On speakers," Alina ordered, bracing herself. What came through wasn't a voice, but rather a symphony of mechanical and organic sounds that somehow formed words in their minds. "We have returned. We bring evolution. We bring transcendence. We bring the gift of the Nexus." The message repeated 3 times before falling silent, leaving the command center in a state of stunned silence. Alina felt a chill run down her spine as she looked at the transformed warship. The Harbinger had returned after more than a century, but whatever it had encountered out there in the dark between the stars had changed it fundamentally. The question was, had it returned as a herald of humanity's evolution or its extinction? "Send word to Earth," she commanded, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Tell them the Harbinger has returned, but it's not alone, and whatever's controlling it now isn't entirely human anymore." As her crew rushed to comply with her orders, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing at the threshold of something momentous. The Harbinger's return wasn't just the resolution of a historical mystery. It was the beginning of something far more significant. Humanity had spent centuries looking to the stars, wondering if we were alone. Now, through one of our own lost ships, something out there had finally answered. And Alina Blackwood, standing watch at the edge of human space, would be among the first to discover whether that answer would bring salvation or destruction. Within 12 hours of the Harbinger's appearance, Neptune Defense Station Aegis had become the center of the largest military mobilization in the outer solar system. 3 Federation battleships had arrived through the Quantum Gate network: the Hyperion, the Valiant, and the Starfall. Their imposing silhouettes formed a defensive triangle around the station, weapons primed but not yet targeted at the mysterious visitor. Commander Alina Blackwood stood in the station's main briefing room, facing the holographic representations of Fleet Admiral Jun Zhao and the captains of the response fleet. The room's air was thick with tension as she delivered her report. "The Harbinger hasn't made any aggressive moves since its initial transmission," Alina explained, manipulating the holographic display to show the vessel's current position. "But we've detected increasing energy signatures throughout its hull. Whatever modifications it underwent, they're becoming more active." Admiral Zhao's hologram nodded gravely. "The Security Council has reviewed your initial findings, Commander. They've authorized a boarding mission. We need to know what happened to that ship and what kind of threat it poses." "Sir, with all due respect," Captain Diana Rivera of the Hyperion interjected, "we're dealing with technology we don't understand. The Harbinger's quantum signature alone defies our current scientific understanding." "Which is precisely why we need to investigate," a new voice joined the conversation. Dr. Raj Patel, the Federation's leading xenotechnologist, stepped into the briefing room. His physical presence, rather than a hologram, carried additional weight. "The Harbinger might represent the most significant technological leap in human history." Alina studied the scientist's eager expression with concern. "Or it could be a Trojan horse, Doctor. The ship mentioned something called the Nexus. We have no idea what that means." "Then let's find out," Patel replied, his eyes gleaming with barely contained excitement. "I've assembled a team of specialists. With your permission, Admiral, I'd like to lead the investigation personally." Admiral Zhao's hologram flickered as he considered the request. "Granted, but under strict military escort. Commander Blackwood will lead the operation. Captain Rivera, your ship will provide close support." The briefing concluded with detailed mission parameters, but Alina's mind was already racing through scenarios. Something about this felt wrong, like they were being pulled along by an invisible current toward an inevitable destination. 2 hours later, Alina stood in the Aegis's launch bay, surveying her team. Dr. Patel and his 3 specialists were running final checks on their analysis equipment. Lieutenant Marcus Joe would handle communications, while Security Chief Kira Yashida and her squad of 6 Marines provided protection. They were the best of the best, but Alina couldn't shake the feeling they were walking into something far beyond their experience. "Final equipment check," Alina ordered, her voice echoing in the cavernous bay. "The Harbinger's internal environment is reportedly stable, but keep your suits sealed until we verify atmospheric conditions. And remember, we're dealing with a ship that's been missing for over a century. Anything we find in there could be dangerous." The team boarded 2 shuttles, launching into the void with practiced precision. As they approached the Harbinger, Alina got her first close-up view of the modifications. The geometric patterns she'd observed earlier were actually composed of millions of tiny, crystalline structures that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. The organic protrusions pulsed with bioluminescent light, creating an effect that was both beautiful and deeply unsettling. "Energy patterns are fluctuating," Marcus reported from his station. "It's as if the ship is reacting to our presence." The shuttles docked with the Harbinger's main airlock, the magnetic seals engaging with a dull thud that resonated through their suits. Alina took point as the airlock cycled, her pulse quickening as the inner doors began to open. The quantum cascade spread through space like ripples in a cosmic pond. From the relative safety of their retreating shuttles, Alina and her surviving team watched as the Harbinger's transformation began to reverse. The crystalline structures that had seemed so beautiful and terrible collapsed into quantum chaos, taking with them a technology that could have revolutionized human civilization, or ended it. Multiple quantum signatures destabilizing, Marcus reported, his voice heavy with exhaustion. The Nexus vessels, they're being affected by the feedback loop. The network is collapsing. Through the shuttle's viewports, they witnessed the impossible. The massive crystalline ships that had emerged near Earth began to fragment, their quantum-based structures unable to maintain coherence once the network was disrupted. It was like watching mountains dissolve into stardust. Dr. Patel sat in silence, his eyes fixed on his sensor readings. The scientist in him mourned the loss of knowledge, but even he couldn't deny the necessity of their actions. The price of that knowledge had been too high. Commander Kira Yashida called from her position at the tactical station. The Harbinger. Alina turned to watch her former ship's final moments. The proud vessel that had once been the pride of the Federation fleet was transforming one last time. As the quantum technologies failed, the hybrid beings trapped within its structure reached out with one final, desperate attempt at communication. The ship's remaining quantum sensors broadcast a message that echoed through both space and consciousness. We were wrong. Evolution cannot be forced. The gift must be earned. Remember us. Learn from us. The stars hold other paths. In a flash of quantum energy that briefly outshone Neptune's reflected sunlight, the Harbinger disappeared. Not destroyed, not entirely. Rather, it scattered across multiple quantum realities, its transformed crew and their impossible technology dispersed beyond recovery. The other Nexus vessels followed, their quantum structures collapsing into dimensional rifts that sealed themselves moments later. In less than an hour, the threat of forced evolution had passed, leaving humanity shaken but free to choose its own path. Hours later, Alina stood in the Aegis Station's medical bay, watching Dr. Patel examine the few samples of crystalline technology they'd managed to recover before the collapse. Most were inert now, their quantum properties lost with the network that powered them. But they remained as evidence of what humanity might one day achieve or encounter among the stars. We'll learn from this, Patel said, looking up from his work. Not the way they wanted us to, but on our own terms, the quantum principles underlying their technology. Even these remnants could advance our understanding by decades. If we're ready for it, Alina replied, thinking of Chen's final warning. They weren't wrong about everything. The universe is changing. Humanity needs to evolve to face what's out there, but it has to be our choice, our path. Admiral Zhao's hologram appeared in the medical bay. Commander Blackwood, the Security Council has reviewed your preliminary report. There will be a full inquiry, of course, but I want you to know you made the right call. The cost of keeping that technology would have been the very essence of what makes us human. Alina nodded, but her mind was already turning to the future. The Harbinger's return had changed everything. Humanity now knew with certainty that there were forces out there beyond their comprehension, civilizations that had taken evolutionary paths they could barely understand. Admiral, she said, straightening her posture, request permission to establish a new division within the Federation fleet. We need to be better prepared for what's out there, not just militarily, but scientifically, philosophically. The Harbinger showed us that evolution takes many forms, and we need to understand them all. Zhao's hologram smiled. Already approved, Commander, or should I say, Captain Blackwood? The Stellar Evolution Research and Defense Initiative is yours to command. Choose your people, set your priorities, but remember the lesson we learned today. Evolution through understanding, not through force, Alina said, the words feeling right. We'll find our own path to the future. As the hologram faded, Alina turned to look out the medical bay's window at the star-filled void. The Harbinger's transformed crew had called their crystalline technology the gift. But the real gift had been the warning they'd brought. Humanity needed to grow, to change, to evolve. But they would do it their way, through choice and understanding, through trial and error, through success and failure. Somewhere out there, scattered across quantum realities, The consciousness that had once been the Harbinger's crew continued their own evolution. And here, in normal space, humanity began its own journey toward an uncertain but self-determined future. Dr. Patel set down his instruments and joined Alina at the window. They'll be back, won't they? Maybe not the Nexus, but something like them. The universe seems to have a way of pushing species toward evolution. Yes, Alina agreed, her eyes fixed on the distant stars. But next time we'll be ready, not to fight necessarily, but to understand, to choose, to evolve on our own terms. The stars seemed to shine brighter as they stood there, witnesses to humanity's first steps toward a new understanding of their place in the cosmos. The Harbinger's return had ended, but humanity's true journey was just beginning. The crystalline tendrils advancing toward Alina's team suddenly halted as alarms blared throughout the Harbinger. The hybrid beings turned their luminous eyes upward, their movements becoming more urgent. Multiple quantum signatures detected, Marcus's voice crackled through the comm. The Federation fleet, they're engaging the emerging Nexus vessels. Through the three-dimensional map still hovering around them, Alina watched as Federation warships poured through quantum gates near Earth, Mars, and the major colonies. Humanity wasn't going down without a fight. You resist what you don't understand, Chen said, but there was uncertainty in his harmonic voice now. The gift is evolution, not destruction. Evolution should be a choice, Alina responded, her mind racing through options. You're not offering evolution, you're forcing transformation. There's a difference. Dr. Patel's scanner emitted a high-pitched whine. Commander, the crystalline structures. They're not just technological or biological. They're quantum computers processing reality itself. The entire ship is becoming a quantum consciousness. The revelation hit Alina like a physical blow. The Harbinger wasn't just a vessel anymore. It was becoming a node in some vast, universe-spanning network. Each transformed crew member was both an individual and part of this greater quantum consciousness. A massive explosion rocked the ship. Through the map, they watched as Federation forces scored their first victory, destroying one of the emerging Nexus vessels. The crystalline structures around them pulsed red with what could only be described as pain. The network feels it, Chief Yoshida whispered. They're all connected. Chen's expression shifted to something approaching sadness. We hope to guide you to make the transition peaceful, but you leave us no choice. The gift will be given. Preservation protocols activated. The ship's transformation accelerated dramatically. Crystalline growth surged through every corridor, consuming standard materials and restructuring them at the quantum level. The hybrid beings began to merge with the walls, their forms becoming one with the ship's new architecture. Commander, Marcus called out urgently. The Harbinger's weapons are powering up, but not traditional weapons. They're building quantum fields around Earth's major cities. Alina made her decision. Dr. Patel, you said these structures are quantum computers. Can they be overloaded? The scientist's eyes widened behind his faceplate. Theoretically, yes. A cascading quantum feedback loop could. He stopped, realizing the implications. But, Commander, the knowledge we could gain would mean nothing if humanity loses its right to choose its own path, Alina finished. She turned to her team. New mission, we're going to overload the Harbinger's quantum network. Chief Yoshida, get your people to the engineering section. Dr. Patel, guide them. Lieutenant Joe, coordinate with the fleet. We need them to keep those other vessels occupied. Chen and the other hybrids moved to intercept them, their bodies now trailing streams of crystalline energy. We cannot allow this. The gift must be given. Marines, defensive formation, Yoshida ordered. Non-lethal if possible, they're still partially human. The corridor erupted into chaos. The Marines' stun weapons proved surprisingly effective against the hybrid beings, the electromagnetic pulses disrupting their quantum crystalline components. But for each one they disabled, two more emerged from the ship's structure. Alina led a team toward what had once been the main engineering chamber, now a cathedral of crystalline technology pulsing with quantum energy. Dr. Patel worked feverishly at what remained of a control interface, his fingers dancing across surfaces that shifted between solid and energy. The quantum network operates on principles of resonance, he explained quickly. If we can create a destructive interference pattern, a crystalline tendril whipped through the air, nearly impaling him. Elena's plasma pistol reduced it to shards, but more were growing from the walls. Whatever you're going to do it fast, Yashida shouted, her marines forming a shrinking perimeter as hybrid beings pressed in from all sides. Through the ship's quantum-enhanced sensors, Elena watched the battle raging across the solar system. Federation ships were fighting brilliantly, but they were outmatched by the Nexus vessel's impossible technology. Earth's quantum fields were nearly complete. The gift comes, Chen's voice resonated through the ship's structure. Resistance brings only pain. Almost there, Patel muttered, his hands shaking as he made final adjustments. But Commander, this will destroy everything, all this knowledge lost. Elena placed her hand on his shoulder. Some knowledge comes at too high a price. Humanity needs to find its own path to evolution. Yashida's perimeter broke as crystalline tendrils pulled two Marines into the walls, their screams cutting off as the transformation began. They had seconds, not minutes. Now, Doctor, Elena ordered, do it now. Patel activated the feedback loop. The crystalline structures began to vibrate, their light becoming blinding. Chen and the other hybrids stopped their advance, their faces showing the first real expression Elena had seen, fear. You don't understand what you're destroying, Chen said, his voice distorting as the quantum network began to collapse. The gift, the future. The Harbinger shuddered as if in pain. Through the disintegrating quantum map, Elena watched the massive Nexus vessels pause in their advance, affected by the feedback cascading through their network. Everyone back to the shuttles, Elena commanded. Move. They ran through corridors that were literally dissolving around them, the once beautiful crystalline structures shattering into quantum chaos. Behind them, the hybrid beings were being drawn back into the ship's structure, their individual forms losing coherence as the network that sustained them collapsed. The future of humanity hung in the balance, and the price of freedom would be paid in sacrificed knowledge and lost possibilities. But as Elena led her remaining team toward escape, she knew they had made the right choice. Evolution without choice wasn't evolution at all, it was extinction of everything that made us human. The corridor beyond was transformed. The Harbinger's original military-industrial design was still visible, but it had been overtaken by the same crystalline growth they'd observed outside. The walls seemed to breathe, patterns of light flowing through the structures like blood through veins. Atmospheric analysis coming in, one of Patel's specialists announced. Oxygen levels normal, but there are trace elements we can't identify. Recommend keeping suits sealed. They moved deeper into the ship, their helmet lights creating shifting shadows in the crystalline growths. Each step took them further from familiar territory and deeper into what felt like a living organism. Commander, Kira called out, her rifle trained on something ahead. You need to see this. In what had once been a standard corridor intersection, they found the first clear evidence of the ship's transformation. A human-sized pod of crystalline material pulsed with inner light, and through its semi-transparent surface, they could make out a humanoid form. Dr. Patel approached with his scanners, his excitement evident even through his suit's comm system. Incredible! The crystalline structure appears to be both organic and technological. It's as if. The pod suddenly pulsed with intense light, and the form inside moved. Fall back, Elena ordered. But before they could retreat, similar pods along the corridor began to activate, their occupants stirring from what appeared to be a long dormancy. The first pod cracked open with a sound like breaking glass, releasing a cloud of luminescent particles. Through the haze, a figure emerged, humanoid but transformed, its body a hybrid of organic tissue and crystalline technology. The being opened its eyes, revealing orbs of swirling light that fixed upon the boarding party with alien intelligence. When it spoke, its voice was a harmony of human speech and mechanical resonance. The sleepers awaken, the Nexus calls, the evolution begins. Elena raised her weapon, knowing they had just crossed a threshold from which there would be no return. The mystery of the Harbinger's disappearance was about to be revealed, but the price of that knowledge might be higher than anyone had anticipated. The crystalline being's emergence triggered an immediate response from the Marine squad. Weapons trained on the hybrid creature, their targeting lasers creating a web of red dots across its transformed body. But Alina held up her hand, stopping them from firing. The being made no aggressive moves. Instead, it tilted its head, studying them with those luminous eyes. Its body was a marvel of impossible engineering, human flesh seamlessly merged with the same crystalline technology that had overtaken the ship. More pods were opening along the corridor, releasing similar transformed crew members. "I know you," the first being said, its voice carrying echoes of human emotion beneath the mechanical resonance. "Not you specifically, but what you are. We were like you once, before the gift, before the Nexus showed us the way." Dr. Patel stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overwhelming his caution. "You're from the original crew? You're still conscious after all this time?" "Time," the being seemed to consider the concept. "Time flows differently in the spaces between spaces. We have been moments and eternities. We are Lieutenant Commander James Chen, and we are more than James Chen ever was." Alina's tactical mind raced. The name matched the Harbinger's historical crew manifest, the ship's executive officer. "What happened to you? What is the Nexus?" The hybrid Chen raised a crystalline hand, and the corridor walls pulsed with light, projecting images into the air around them. They saw the Harbinger during its final battle in the Frontier Wars, pursuing an unknown vessel through a tear in space-time. "We followed them," Chen's voice narrated as the images shifted. "The raiders who had been striking our colonies. We thought they were human separatists using stolen technology. We were wrong. They were messengers leading us to enlightenment." The projections showed the Harbinger emerging in unknown space, surrounded by massive crystalline structures that dwarfed the warship. Living cities that pulsed with the same biotechnological energy they now saw throughout the transformed vessel. "The Nexus is not a place or a being," Chen continued. "It is a state of existence, the merging of organic and artificial, the transcendence of individual consciousness into a greater whole. The Raiders were its harbingers, preparing the way for humanity's evolution." Security Chief Yashida's voice was tense over the comm. "Commander, more of them are emerging. We're being surrounded." Indeed, dozens of hybrid beings now filled the corridor, each unique in their crystalline transformations, yet bearing the unmistakable traces of their human origins. Alina noticed they were positioning themselves in a precise geometric pattern. "The gift cannot be forced," Chen said, seeming to sense their growing tension. "But it must be offered. We have waited, evolved, prepared. Now we return to guide humanity toward its next step." Dr. Patel's scanner beeped urgently. "Commander, the energy patterns throughout the ship are changing. They're forming some kind of coherent field." Marcus's voice cut in from the shuttle. "Multiple contacts emerging from quantum space, similar signatures to the Harbinger's transformation technology." Alina's blood ran cold as she realized the truth. The Harbinger hadn't simply returned. It was the advance scout for something much larger. "The Nexus comes," Chen announced, raising both arms as the ship's crystalline structures began to pulse with increasing intensity. "Your civilization stands at a crossroads. Accept evolution or face extinction. The old ways cannot survive what is coming." The hybrid beings began to move in perfect synchronization, their crystalline components resonating with the ship's structure. Energy patterns danced across their forms, building toward some critical threshold. "Fall back to the shuttles," Alina ordered, her training taking over. "Now." But before they could move, every crystalline surface in sight flared with blinding light. When it faded, the corridor had transformed further, and they found themselves standing within what appeared to be a three-dimensional representation of space itself, showing Earth, the colonies, and beyond. Countless points of light were appearing throughout the map, quantum ruptures opening across human space. Through each tier, massive crystalline shapes began to emerge. "We are not invaders," Chen said, his voice now carrying a note of what might have been compassion. We are evolutionaries. The Harbinger was our proof of concept that humanity could not only survive the gift but thrive through it. Now we return to offer that gift to all. Elena watched in horror as the tactical situation became clear. This wasn't first contact or even an invasion. It was a forced transformation on a cosmic scale, orchestrated by beings who had once been human but were now something far beyond. The choice was never whether humanity would evolve, Chen continued, the map highlighting population centers across Earth and the colonies. The choice is whether that evolution will come through guidance or through crisis. We offer the former. The universe itself will eventually demand the latter. As if to emphasize his point, the crystalline technology throughout the ship began to spread faster, reaching toward the boarding party like living tendrils of light. The transformed crew moved with it, their bodies becoming channels for the ship's evolving architecture. Elena knew they had only moments to decide, retreat with this critical intelligence or stay to learn more at the risk of being transformed themselves. Either way, humanity's future had just been irrevocably altered by the return of a long-lost ship and the impossible evolution of its crew.